Hello, my name is Samuel George London, and welcome to Comics for the Apocalypse. On today's episode, I speak to comic book writer and incredibly insightful person, Asa Wheatley, about what comics he would take into the apocalypse. But before we get into it, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to the show and for all the feedback that I get on how to improve it. Also, I'd like to extend a further thank you to those of you who have reviewed us on iTunes, as we're now officially a 5-star podcast. I'm not sure how long that will last, but if you'd like to help the show reach more people, then please review us on iTunes, however you see fit, and that will help us appear in podcast listeners' recommended feeds. Now, without further ado, on with the show. Hello, Asa Wheatley. How's it going?
Hello, it's very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Having a fairly busy Monday here at my home office, but no, it's all good. What about yourself?
It's always good to be busy, though. Yeah, the same. Just prepping bits and pieces for upcoming projects and things like that.
Nice. And speaking of which, for anybody that doesn't know, what do you do in the world of comics?
So I am a indie comics writer. I kind of delved into it mostly last year, I've been doing it beforehand, but last year was when I published the first book that I've done, which was called Tales of Mystery. It's a noir mystery series about a private detective that gets trapped in the body of a black cat.
Wow.
There are 2 issues of that out currently, and there are going to be 2 more. And then at the moment, as you are listening to this, there is currently a Kickstarter running for my next project, which is called Sprouting and Other Tales of the Curious. As you can probably guess, it is an anthology. It's got comics and prose in it. I was working with 5 different artists who have done an amazing job on it, and we got Emily Pearson, who did Snap Flash Hustle and the Wilds, to do the cover. Yeah. And the cover looks amazing, and yeah, so you can find that on Kickstarter. It's Sprouting and Other Tales of the Curious.
Fantastic. So just search that in Kickstarter, and also that link will be in the show notes, so people can just click straight through there. And where else can they find you on the interwebs?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. It's at Asa Wheatley. I'm one of the lucky few who my name is rare enough that I can get my whole name on Twitter without underscores or numbers. So yeah, if you just search my name on Twitter, you can find it. And my website is just asawheatley.com as well. So all stuff about the things that I write is all on there as well. And there's a page dedicated to the Kickstarter too, so you can find out more information. And then the link is on there as well.
Perfect, man. Cool. Well, that aside, unfortunately, I've got some bad breaking news for you, because there's actually been a robot uprising, and the entire globe has been taken over by an artificial intelligent robot. So my first question to you is, what's your plan for survival?
Well, it kind of depends, I think. It depends on how nice the AI is, how good it is with human interaction. If it's just taken over and it's kind of like a utopia, everything's run by robots, humans don't really have to work anymore, then that's kind of great, I think.
Yeah,
maybe
in some ways. I'm
sure it will turn out to be the old utopia is actually a dystopia. But if it's a more harsher environment, then I guess it's doing what everybody promises that they'll do and never does, is just quitting technology.
Yeah.
Hiding out in a cabin somewhere with no sign of any technology being close to anything at all. I guess hunting for food, that would probably be a thing. But I'd probably try not to leave the cabin ever.
Yeah.
And I just stay there and know that my 4 walls will probably for a while protect me until the robots eventually found me. But it depends on how smart they are as well, I guess.
Yeah, as well. You kind of got to really hide yourself if you're going to be
Yeah,
hiding from them, kind of go deep into the wilderness. Any idea where that would be?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard the Canadian wilderness is pretty big, but then there's also
Yeah.
bears there, I think.
Yes, there
Uh,
is.
so I don't know. Maybe the bears would help me fight off the AI robots. Maybe it's the
That'd be cool.
like human and animal has to combine to take back the world from the robots. Um, I mean, to be fair, the more I talk about this, the more I'm convinced that this is a great idea, and so I'm gonna build an army of bears and wolves in the Canadian wilderness.
Amazing. They
Take back,
sound
yeah.
rad. And is anybody coming along with you to your cabin in Canada and your army of bears?
I mean, it'll be fairly open, but not too open that the robots will find out about it. I mean, my girlfriend will definitely be with me, unless she is a robot spy.
Ooh.
I'll try and keep out all the robot spies. I guess I don't really know how you would do that though. So maybe one will get in. I'll never know.
Maybe eventually.
Yeah. But
You
I'd
just
keep
got
it
to do
to
as many tests
a
as you
low
can.
number. Yeah, I'd keep it to a low number just to prevent as many spies as possible.
Yeah. Excellent. So one evening, whilst in your cabin in Canada, and the bears are outside protecting you, your girlfriend starts to ask you about comics, and you're reminiscing about comics, and the first question that she asks is, "What's the first comic you remember enjoying?"
Well, that is pretty easy. I think it was one of the easier questions that I assume she's going to ask me tonight. So the first thing I remembered enjoying is X-Men: Days of Future Past.
Great.
So I got the graphic novel as like a gift from my uncle. He had read comics growing up, and I would always get kind of like Beano and Dandy from him, and I would read the kind of like Panini reprints of the UK Panini reprints that you could get in like newsagents.
Yeah.
But I never really followed them. I never really it was pick up a random one. This week it's got Daredevil in it. Next week it's got Punisher in it, or the X-Men or something like that. But Days of Future Past was kind of my first exposure to I guess a proper comic, quote unquote.
Sure.
The graphic novel has the kind of introduction of Kitty Pryde, as she is obviously an integral part of the Days of Future Past story. Which, having looked back at it preceding this conversation, I realised that the actual Days of Future Past story is only 2 issues long, which seems insane considering.
Yeah, that's pretty short.
Yeah, and how much it has influenced the X-Men universe for it such a small story. But the graphic novel also has like a Christmas issue in it as well. I guess they had to fill it out considering the actual story is only 2 issues long. But yeah, I kind of delved straight into it. I'm a big believer of, especially Marvel comics and especially things like X-Men, of there is no good starting point. You just have to jump in, and if you don't get on with the confusion of who everyone is, what's going on, then superhero comics probably aren't for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it. I wanted to know who everybody was. I liked all their cool powers and costumes. I didn't understand half of what was going on when I was reading it, I'm sure. But I just remember specifically enjoying that and me wanting to read more of them, more of that specific team, and more kind of Marvel comics.
Awesome. And do you think that that's had an impact on your creative process today?
Oh, my creative process? Probably, yeah. I think it's definitely given me less worry sometimes when there's a lot of not necessarily a lot of exposition, but a lot of kind of information, a lot of world around what's going on. I think it's made me worry less about overfilling that kind of stuff. And if a reader is interested, then they will pursue it and find out more. And if they're not, then they'll just ignore it. And it doesn't have to be something that they have to know to enjoy the story. But sometimes a bit of extra world building around the story can just make it feel a bit more realized. I think reading things like that era of X-Men where there was so much going on. I mean, the graphic novel that I have starts with Cyclops leaving. It's one issue about Cyclops leaving, and then it kind of just moves on immediately. And it's almost a weird inclusion that they included that issue of him leaving. They could have just included the next one. I assume it was something to do with they had to include a certain number of issues to make it a graphic novel. But it gave you a little glimpse into the world. Obviously, something big had happened beforehand, but it didn't kind of dwell on it. It then just moved straight on to the next story, and it was very much you can go find out what happened before all this if you want. But if you just want to read what's happening now, then that's totally fine. And it didn't take away from anything if you weren't bothered.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's kind of a good lesson, I guess. That if you are kind of creating like an expansive world, that and you do have kind of spin-offs and stuff like that, that you can leave a thread there, and it's up to the reader whether they want to pull it or not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, oh, that's fantastic. So the conversation with your girlfriend moves on to what's the funniest or the comic that made you laugh out loud the most?
Okay, so this is a more recent entry. So it's a book called Sex Castle. And it's have you heard of Sex Castle before?
I hadn't before, but I looked it up when your choices came through, and it looks like fantastic fun.
It is. It's really good. It is kind of the perfect parody, and as
it's not perverted, by the way, for the listeners, because it sounds like it off the bat. But.
Yeah. It was weird though, because it did. I'm not sure if it came out near it, but it definitely came to my attention around the same time as the Sex Criminals book.
Oh, right, okay.
And they are two very completely different books.
Yes, yeah.
But Sex Castle is essentially a parody of an 80s action film. And as all good parodies are, it is, in essence, an 80s action film in and of itself.
Yeah, I think in the pitch on Image Comics it says it's the best 80s movie that was never made.
Yes, and that is the perfect summation of it. And it is about he's like an action hero assassin kind of guy called Shane Sex Castle.
Great name.
Yeah, brilliant name. Some of the names in this are amazing. So there is a page that I found. I'm holding the book in front of me. And there is a bit in the story. So the story is kind of basically about he's the world's greatest assassin, and he leaves the world of like assassins behind and kind of moves to a small town, as all great 80s action heroes do.
You're right.
And then all these people, his past basically comes back to haunt him, and all these assassins come to kill him. And there is a single page where one of the characters has just told Sex Castle that the top 9 assassins are coming to kill him. And there is single panels of each of these people, and they are all an 80s action star that you would 100% know. So there's Dutch Matrix, who is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, there's got to be a Dutch.
Yeah, there's Sydney Phoenix, who is Wesley Snipes, basically. There is the Old Man, which is a very crinkled-looking Clint Eastwood. And the Dam Twins, which is a homage to Jean-Claude Van Damme. I'll leave some of the others for when people read it, but it is brilliantly written. It's really simple. It's in a really nice small format as well.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing that very easily fits into a like bag. If you're traveling or something like that, you can read it in one sitting. So if you know you've got like a train journey ahead of you, and it is just pure insane action fun. It is kind of brutal at times.
Oh, right, yeah.
But Carl Stark's artwork is very, not cartoony, but very expressive. And the main character basically looks like Snake Plissken, from Escape from New York and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's brilliant. The book is black and white, and yeah, just it is the perfect parody because it is the thing that it is parodying.
Oh yeah, totally. It's kind of like a parody of the Expendables before the Expendables. Almost.
Yeah, that's kind of almost what it exactly is. It's if the Expendables film was about the Expendables going to like kill this like best assassin in the world, that's what this book would be, except way better.
Yeah. Kind of, I guess, Expendables and John Wick, but with tongue in cheek.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Although they kind of have tongue in cheek a little bit, though, both those films, but
to a degree, yeah.
To a degree, maybe more John Wick than Expendables, but
yes, yeah, I'd say so.
But that's awesome. That's fantastic. And is there a particular moment in there that really kind of got you a belly laugh?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think there's a particular moment because it is almost every other page, if not every page, there is something great on it. Like the first page is his birth, and it's 4 panels, and it's from his point of view. I assume because it's 2 doctors. Yeah, it's 2 doctors, and one doctor just says, "Doctor, I need you here. This baby is not responding properly." The other one just says, "Would you look at that, nurse? This baby was born mean." And that's his introduction. That's Shane Sexcastle's introduction. And yeah, I don't think there's a specific moment because there are just so many, and the lettering is really good, and it's kind of more expressive than just your classic Biff, pow and stuff like that. It's a bit more descriptive as to what is actually happening in the panels as well. So I don't think I could say one moment because the whole book is just hilarious and tops itself constantly.
Action-packed, sounds excellent.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And then changing gears, your girlfriend asks you, what's the saddest or most upsetting comic that you've read?
So this was the hardest one for me, and I think reading or watching sad fiction is for me is kind of how a lot of people approach horror. Horror is a very specific genre that some people love. I am one of those people, and some people just don't get on with for whatever reason. That's totally fine. I'm sure I listened to an episode of yours earlier where somebody was talking about horror comics and how it was something that they just didn't get on with.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what sad media is for me. I don't ever want to like read something that will make me sad.
Yeah.
But sometimes it happens. Sometimes they fall through the cracks. So the book that I've chosen is a book called Eternal.
Yeah.
Which is it's a really good Viking self-contained story. It's presented in this really beautiful kind of large format. It's from Black Mask Studios, and it was Brian K. Lindsay is the writer. Eric Zawadatsky, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I think so.
Is illustrator, and it was coloured by D. Cunniff. And it is a beautifully realised book that has and I don't want to spoil it, but it has a very sad moment about halfway through.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing that I think you could deal with, not badly, but you could deal with in a very simple way. It essentially contains the death of a character, and the pages following there are 4 pages, and 3 of them are just blank. They're just black, and then one of them is one character looking out across the ocean. It's got this kind of large black border, and the only that character is all in silhouette, and then the only image in front of you is a burning like longboat,
right?
Which is obviously the dead character being shipped off. And and I am a sucker for anything Viking. If you put the word Viking on something, I will read it and I will buy it.
Great. Good to know.
yeah. So anything Viking, I will buy. But yeah, it's a very violent book, and then the violence kind of comes back to bite them. And yeah, it is those blank pages. They really give you like a moment to just sit with what has happened. And I think that's what kind of gives it the biggest impact. There's a lot of stuff where you see in comics or in media, you see something sad or upsetting happen, and then you see the characters reacting to it, and that's kind of what informs you about if you should be sad or if you should be happy or things like that. But I think what's so good about Eternal is that moment happens, and then it just lets you sit with it. It gives you these blank pages, which are just time for you to kind of reflect on what has just happened and realize what's just happened, and then the next scene is the character who you would think that you would see all the emotion from, but it's just them silhouetted. You see nothing from them, and it's just the flaming boat. And yeah, I just thought it was super impactful. The book is amazing around all that as well, but that moment in particular and that time, and who thought that some of the best work in a comic book would be a blank page?
Yeah, I mean, it's very smart in a way, because Ryan K. Lindsay, he's a great writer. And of course the artist contributing to that. He's obviously thought that the moment is going to speak for itself, and the reader can kind of fill in the emotion.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it does. I think you read it and you just sit with it, and it giving you that moment to pause really makes it way more impactful than if it happened and then it had just immediately moved on to something else.
Yeah. Then it would kind of lose the moment.
Yeah,
but kind of that foresight to put those in is paramount. That's amazing. Definitely check out Eternal from Black Mask Studios. Moving emotions again. The next question that comes up is, what's the scariest or most horrifying comic that you've read?
So, like I said in the previous question, I love horror. I love everything horror. Like Vikings, if you put horror on something, I will probably read it or at least try and check it out. That's a lot harder to narrow down. But yeah, so this was quite hard in a different way, because a lot of the time I think because I've read so much, I've almost desensitized myself to stuff, and things don't scare me as much anymore. But something that, and I may divide your audience on this, but something that I have only just started recently reading, despite my love of horror, is the Alan Moore, Eddie Campbell From Hell. Right,
the absolute classic.
Yes, the absolute classic that I have only started reading and I haven't finished yet.
Yeah, well, it's a big book.
Yeah, well, so I not I dislike, but I find it harder to read massive tomes. I much prefer kind of shorter, maybe like single issue things or single stories. But I find myself reading a kind of shorter one shot against reading like a 20 part or thing all combined together. Those massive omnibuses that you can get, they have never appealed to me, because I would rather read things in smaller chunks. So I'd always wanted to read From Hell, but as you said, it is such a massive book. I just never got around to it. It was always the kind of thing that I looked at and I went, oh, I'll read that at some point, but not today.
It's almost the Citizen Kane of comics.
Kind of, yeah.
Like, everybody like knows that it's the greatest film that there's ever. Also, it's meant to be the greatest film that there's ever been. But like, whether or not you get around to watching it is another question.
Yeah, pretty much. And so my stepdad was big into comics, and he was a big influence on me reading comics and what I read. And one of the books that he had was From Hell. And I looked at it for all the years that I lived at home, and it was always like, I'll read that one day. I'll read that before I go. I'll read it before I go to uni. Oh, I'll read it when I go back over Christmas. Oh, I'll read it this time. Never, ever read it. And then recently, the publisher, I think it's Knockabout or Top Shelf, have re-released them in small chunks. So small kind of US standard format comics.
Great.
And they've all been colorized.
Okay.
And it's all been colorized by Eddie Campbell, so it's all been done by
by the original artist, yeah.
Yeah, and I did see it the first kind of couple of times, and I was like, oh, it's all in black and white originally. Do I want to read this kind of like newfangled version? But they are kind of the size of just your normal comic book. It's probably, there's some issues that are a little bigger, and they're just really nicely presented. They've got a nice kind of cover design. Each one matches the ones before. I think they're three or four issues in, and there's going to be 10 in total.
Right.
But yeah, so I picked that up and I started reading it, and it was very much that thing of, well, why haven't I read this before? But I think what scares me the most about it, or what is the scariest thing about it, is just how clinical the Doctor is. I can't remember for the life of me his name, but how clinical he is about everything, and how I guess how much like a doctor he is about just like this mass murder essentially, and becoming a serial killer, and the lives of these people that he's just going to pull away for basically an idiot's mistake, and then because he's been told to do it. It's that weird clinical nature of him just being told, oh, this needs to get sorted, and him going, okay, yep, I guess I'll do that then. And there's almost no emotion to it, which I find the most terrifying.
The guy was an absolute psychopath.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not even halfway through.
Amazing.
So I think that's just even more so. I think that's just testament to how impactful it is. But Alan Moore's writing is so dense, and they are almost mini tomes in and of themselves. But yeah, it's enjoyable is a weird thing to say about it, but they are very good.
Intense.
Yeah, intense. Probably. Yeah. I wouldn't want to read them all in one go, and so I don't think I could sit and read that book in one sitting. But kind of a bit of lower light, enough to just read by, and sitting kind of like with a bit of spooky music on. Yeah,
nice. And candlelit as well.
Candlelit, of course. Yeah.
Nasty. And yeah, just for the listeners, if you haven't heard of From Hell before, it's basically kind of the story of Jack the Ripper, essentially, and kind of I suppose the suspicion of the actual suspect.
Yes, yeah. So it puts suspicion on a royal doctor, and it kind of has a lead up as to why these things happen. So maybe they weren't so random, and maybe the victims were selected rather than just randomly killed. But yeah, I who haven't read it, just assumed everybody would know what it was.
Yes, yeah.
Because it is just one of those books that is so well known sometimes.
Yes, yeah, it totally is. But yeah, it's always good to make sure. And From Hell is actually the title is from the From Hell letter, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So From Hell letter is kind of the letter that the police at the time in the kind of late 1800s received, and it's the only letter that they think is actually from the killer.
Yes, because there was a load of other letters as well, but some of them are said to have been forged by the papers or...
Yeah.
But yeah, that's...
Or other people. Basically just having a laugh. At people's expense, like murder victims' expense, which is terrible. But that's the world we live in, I guess. Even back in the Victorian era.
Even back then, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So moving on, we kind of try to get a bit more back into the light. And the next question that comes up is, what's the most meaningful comic to you?
So not veering too far away, sticking on the horror tract.
Yes.
One of, I'm pretty sure it was the first comic that I found myself. So like I said, my uncle read comics and my stepdad read comics, so I always kind of was reading stuff growing up, but it was a lot of stuff that they read or that they had read growing up themselves and things like that. But I found a book called Hack Slash,
right,
which is a kind of slasher parody satire, but then it is kind of like Sex Castle. It is a slasher book in its own right, and it is basically about a young woman who is the daughter of a slasher killer like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees, and her mum was the lunch lady,
right,
and she kind of survives that experience, and so she becomes the final girl, like there are in a lot of horror films of that 80s slasher persuasion. She survives and then vows to essentially kill every other slasher there is out there, and so she goes off traveling with her companion called Vlad, who is this kind of hulking, slightly disfigured guy who wears this terrifying gas mask and in all intents and purposes looks like a slasher himself.
Right.
He carries these two massive machetes, wears a creepy long trench coat, but is the total kind of sweetest, nicest guy in the world. He doesn't fully understand everything. He's slightly dim, but has the kind of biggest heart and is always looking out for the best in people, while they both kind of run around killing slashers. It has a lot of crossovers with actual slasher properties. So there's a kind of crossover with the Reanimator series of films, and Chucky turns up in it at one point.
Oh, right, wow.
There's a crossover with the Hatchet films and the comic Nailbiter,
right,
which is another really good horror comic if you're into horror comics. But yeah, I think it was the first thing I found myself. It was something that I discovered all on my own, and it was the first thing that I went into a comic book shop to find myself.
Oh, great.
So I remember going to Orbital Comics in London, and at their old location where it was almost down like a weird secret set of stairs, and looking for the like graphic novels and stuff like that. And it was the first thing that I started collecting. It was while I had read a lot of kind of big long series of things, or I had read graphic novels. Hack Slash was the first thing that I kind of would search for every month, would make sure I had the next issue of, and I don't think I had a standing order yet at that point, but it was essentially the standing order that I just did myself. I just kept an eye, making sure that I knew when the next issue was out, and which has obviously spawned into a massive collection of stuff that I pick up that has veered up and down over the last few years, and has obviously pushed me into writing my own stuff as well. And so yeah, I think meaningful because it is so important to my kind of comic reading, and then it's also just really good. It can be overly sexualized at times, to say the least, but I think it like Sex Castle, it is very tongue in cheek. It is as much a parody of what it is as just being a slasher film, but in comic form.
Right.
But yeah, it's very fun, while it can still have the quite impactful moments and that kind of thing as well.
Fantastic. So it kind of sounds like it's trying to hit all of the emotions that one goes through, I guess, into comics. And do you think that that comic has had an impact on your creative process? Yeah,
I think so, for sure. I think it's I know that it started with one-shots.
Right.
And it started with a selection of smaller stories set in this one kind of universe, and instead of having like single issues with big overarching stories. And it did lead to that, and it kind of stopped for a while, and it had a resurgence because it was originally written by Tim Seeley, who I think he's now doing some Valiant stuff. He did a big long run on Nightwing as well, which was really good. And the resurgence was written by Teenie Howard, who's done some of the newer X-Men stuff, the kind of big crossover that they're doing at the moment. And it does kind of a really good job of having the single issue, like one-shot story almost, as well as an overarching story, and it kind of gives you a good example of, or it gave me a good example at least of how to build a world, kind of like when we were talking about the Days of Future Past, and you have this world around it, but the comic you're reading has this singular story, and you can just read that and be satisfied. But if there's more interest in the world around it, you can go and read other issues and things like that. And I think that's definitely helped. And the book that I'm writing at the moment, Tales of Mystery, is a 4-issue series that's kind of got a bigger world around it. And there are possible plans to do other series, all kind of set within the same world. But that kind of thing where you read one and you don't have to read the other, but they kind of inform each other, and they build on each other. But yeah, I think so. I think it's definitely influenced my work, and I haven't written as much horror stuff. I think because I was not afraid, but I was, which is ironic because it's horror.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be pegged into that corner of just doing horror stuff, and so I think now that I've kind of done a couple of books, and the horror is gonna start to shine through. In the new anthology, in the Sprouting anthology, there are a couple of horror stories in there as well, and so yeah, the horror and the influence from books like Hack Slash will definitely start to show through soon.
Fantastic! I look forward to it. So your conversation in the cabin moves on to what's the most underrated comic?
Okay, so this one was this was hard, and I think other people have had the same issue with. I don't know what an underrated comic can be sometimes, because I picked Queen and Country, which is a British set spy thriller. It's really good. It's all black and white. They did quite a while ago. I think they did these really nice, quite thick paperback copies that had like 12 issues in them each, I think. And each of the stories is about 3 to 4 issues long. So you can kind of read one story, you get the complete thing. Is written by Greg Rucka, and then there's a slew of other really good artists. I know that in the first volume, at least, Brian Lee O'Malley, I think, did some of the inking on one of the issues, and there's a part illustrated by Stan Sakai, who did Usagi Yojimbo.
Right.
And he just has a kind of small, I think it's like an interlude in one of the stories. But so I'm holding my copy of it, and I thought, oh yeah, this will be a great book to pick for underrated. I don't really hear people talk about it anymore.
Right.
It's the kind of thing that I would expect to in the age of kind of I know it's dying out a bit more, but in the age of James Bond being as big as it was like a few years ago and things like that, I'm surprised that Queen and Country hasn't been picked up to be something in another media, whether it's film or TV. But as I'm looking at my copy of the graphic novel, it comes to my attention that it actually won an Eisner. So it can't be that underrated, because
No.
it won Best New Series. It was in 2001, so it was quite a while ago. It's right, but yeah, I think it's really good. It's just solid spy stories, really good characters, and I think it's just something that I just don't hear people talking about. I think it's maybe it's not old enough that it's considered a classic yet, and it kind of falls in that middle ground where early 2000s, a lot of people talk about the 90s and early 2000s being as the worst time for comics. But yeah, I think it is that thing. It should be so much more well renowned, but I guess it was because it won an Eisner.
Well, at the time. And these things kind of get forgotten a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Which sucks. But yeah, I mean, just opportunities like this to try and revive it is what it's all about.
But yeah, if you like any kind of spy or crime or anything like that, and you haven't read Queen and Country, I would definitely pick it up. It is a fantastic book.
Awesome. And so we come on to the most difficult question, which is, for you, what's the best comic of all time?
Okay, so I chose the Parker books, the Richard Starks Parker, which was they are adaptations. So they're adaptations of novels, a series of novels, I believe, and they are adapted and illustrated by Darwin Cook. So probably one of the best comic artists there has ever been. The Parker books are a kind of crime noir. Each one, I think there's 4. Each one is a different story. They are presented in these really nice, kind of smaller format hardbacks. I think you can get them in paperbacks as well, but if you can get your hands on the hardback, they are really nice. And each of the stories is done in like monochrome, so it's single color. So it's not quite black and white. The first one's in this kind of slightly blue tone. I think one of them's in a slightly orange tone. So all the shading and the background and that kind of thing is all in this single color. And they're just so well paced, so well put together. Parker is a dislikable hero. He's your kind of hero who he's a bad guy, but he has a code. But sometimes his code is maybe things that you should definitely not agree with. But they are all just a very compelling read. I don't think I'm going to go out on a limb, and I don't think there is anything wrong with any of them. I think there are some that are better than others, and yeah, they are the perfect summation of a comic book, I think, and the kind of visual storytelling that comic gives you. It's sometimes the lettering and the text will be kind of take up half the page and be along the side, and sometimes it'll be word balloons. Sometimes it will be a page of mostly text with a kind of drawn image around it, but it never feels jarring. It all just kind of flows so nicely, and yeah. So I think that's why it's maybe the best comic of all time. It's maybe not to everybody's tastes, but I think.
But this is for you.
Yeah, and I think it's the best example of the comic art as well.
Amazing. And are there any standout moments for you in that book?
Oh, that's difficult. I'm looking at it now.
Right.
There is, I think so. I think there's 4. The first one's called The Hunter, and I think it's in one of the. I think it's in the second or third one, and there's a bit where he essentially finds out that he's been betrayed.
Right.
Or that kind of thing where the hero finds out that their plan wasn't the plan that everybody else was going by.
Yeah.
And it's him enacting his revenge and getting his own back, but doing it his way. And you kind of come to realize that, like, oh, this kind of was the plan all along, and he is way smarter than everybody else, and he's very much a character that we do things as we've said and not change things along the way, and not every criminal is like that, as you find throughout the book. And you really get a sense of how much he believes he's much smarter and much better than a lot of people,
right?
Especially in the kind of criminal world. And as you read the books, you realize that he is right. Arrogant, yeah, sure, but he is right, and he will plan for things to go wrong, knowing that people won't listen to him and stuff like that. And I think it's, as much as it is just a great story, it's very much a character study just about him. And so I think all that kind of like lower level like character stuff that can sometimes in the big crime epic books be pushed aside by the story. I think this is an example of something where the characters push the story to go forward, and Parker is an amazing character.
Awesome. And so our last question for comics is, if you could only take one of these comics into the apocalypse, which would it be?
Okay, so I think it was fairly easy for me on this one. I chose Hack Slash because it's got comedy, it's got action, it's got horror. In some cases, it even has sentimentality and sadness. And we all know how much I don't like to read about sadness, but it has that in there as well, and it just has a bit of everything, and it was the most meaningful comic to me. But in regards to this, I had a question for you. Yeah. So if I can take what quantifies as one comic, so is it a single issue, a trade, or is it the series?
It's the series.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can take the entire Hack Slash series.
That's amazing, because there's loads. I think there's about 6 or 7 omnibuses. So that'll keep me entertained for at least a day when I'm not trying want to avoid being infiltrated by robot spies. So yeah, I'd say hack slash is definitely the thing that I would take in.
Fantastic, and hopefully your bear army will keep you safe.
Yeah, maybe I can
the
read them
robots on that
stories from it as well and see how they react. Show them some tips on how to take out the robots, maybe.
Yeah, there you go. That sounds good to me. And our very last question is: now that you're in this robot takeover apocalypse, what weapon, tool, or useful item would you take into the apocalypse with you?
Okay, so this is a self-defense mechanism, I guess. In the remote cabin, surrounded by bears, there is one piece of technology that I will keep with me, and hopefully, because it's battery operated, it will be okay. But as a way to fend off any robots that do come through, and maybe this is a way that we can work out who the spies are as well. I've decided that I'm going to take a universal remote with me.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm hoping it says it's universal. It says it will work on anything. So I'm hoping if I point it at a robot and I just press off, then they will just turn off. And so if I'm in a chase, I can just turn around, switch them off. Don't know how long it will last for. Maybe they'll reboot or something, but hopefully I'll give myself enough time to run away. Or I'll be able to spot out the spies. Just every human that kind of like comes near me, I'll just press it, see what happens. If they turn off, then I know that they're a robot. Whether it will actually work or not, the only way to test it would be in the field, so to speak.
Exactly. Just got to get out there.
But yeah, it's worth a try, I think.
Yeah, too right. That sounds like a pretty good weapon to me.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Asa Wheatley, thank you so much for sharing your comics for the apocalypse.
Thanks for having me.
It's been real fun. And just one more time for the listeners, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Asa Wheatley, so that's ASAWHEATLEY. My website is just asawheatley.com as well. If you go to Kickstarter and look at Sprouting, I'm sure if you just search Sprouting, but the full title is Sprouting and Other Tales of the Curious, you'll be able to find the Kickstarter on there. It's basically running throughout the whole month of April, so check it out and see if that's something you'll be interested in.
Fantastic. And then do you have any cons coming up?
Yeah, so I've got in May, I'll be going to Oldham Comic Con, which will be the first year that I'll be exhibiting there.
Great.
And then at the end of that month, it will be MCM May as well.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I was thinking of going to that one, but I might not be able to go, just as a punter. But yeah. If I do, I'll let you know.
Yeah, definitely do. I think as a punter, it's something that can be quickly ruined by crowds.
Sure.
Sometimes, but I think Sundays and Fridays are the good days to go. Saturdays are very packed and very warm.
Heaving, no doubt. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Asa. It's been a real pleasure, and best of luck with the Kickstarter.
Thank you very much.
Great. See you soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again to Asa for being on Comics for the Apocalypse. If you'd like to check out Asa's Kickstarter or follow him on social media, those links are in the show notes, along with all of our own links to the various areas of the internet. And finally, as long as the apocalypse doesn't come to pass in the next week, I'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.